All right, this is Project Herpetoculture Podcast, episode 17. Welcome. Um, Before we jump in and introduce our guests, I'd like to do a bit of housekeeping and give a shout out to our host network. That's the Animals at Home Network with Dylan Perrin, the GOAT.
Oh,
And also want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, Custom Reptile Habitats. In our YouTube description and show notes, you'll see an affiliate link there. If you purchase anything from Custom Reptile Habitats using that click-through link, we'll get a little kickback, a little commission. It helps us keep the lights on over here. And we also have now launched our Patreon. So thank you so much to all who have already subscribed. We really appreciate it. And if you're interested in supporting the show, that's a great way to do it. Of course, also, it's really helpful just to like, subscribe, comment, all that algorithm fueling nonsense.
yeah.
It's supportive, so we really appreciate it. And yeah, with all that out of the way, I'm going to pass it over to Phil to introduce our guest.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Roy. So our guest today is Jordan Russell. Jordan, thanks for taking the time to have a conversation with us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Good seeing you.
Of course, ditto. Yeah, right back at you, man. Hopefully all three of us are gonna meet in person someday soon enough.
Yeah. Well, actually, I met Roy at
Oh yeah,
Talk.
you guys all met.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I'm the odd man out on that one, but yeah, that'll happen. So just because I'm curious and I honestly just don't even know, Jordan, how did you even get started in herpetoculture in the first place? Like it's been like a lifelong interest thing? Was there like a specific event? And then was it tied to has your interest in reptiles also always been tied to your interest in birds as well, or were they separate or?
Yeah, it's kind of a weird origin story. I didn't know you were going to ask that. I don't know that I can tell it in a way that's accurate and interesting
Okay.
and all that. But I had kind of a weird childhood. I'm one of 10.
Oh,
I was raised as a Jehovah's Witness.
okay.
So had kind of like a pretty closed off from the world, weird childhood.
Yeah.
And pretty quickly thought birds were cool. You know, birds and dogs were like the coolest things in the world to me. And I started breeding birds maybe around 6. And some people from the Kingdom Hall gave me a pair of Nande conures that were plucked bald and loud. And,
Wow.
I had them for about a week, and my mom was like, "Yo, this is terrible." And I found I think it was in Bird Talk magazine, there was a show coming up in Costa Mesa. Convinced her to bring me. Walked around the show with my pair of bald Nande conures, and just was like, "Would you trade me anything for these? Would you trade me anything for these?" And wound up leaving with a pair of Indian ringnecks. I bred those that year. And just kind of went from there. And then I think it was the next summer, I had a border collie, and we were out in the front yard, and she was barking at the ground. And went over to look, and in the leaf litter at the edge of our front yard, there's a little baby tortoise. And I went door to door asking the neighbors, "Do you have tortoises? Is this your tortoise?" And wound up knocking on this elderly couple's door across the street. And they were like, "Oh, probably. We have a whole bunch of desert tortoises in the backyard.
Oh,
There's probably more in the backyard and more eggs." And they let me go look around. I found a couple more babies. And then they were like, "You can dig up the yard and see if you can find eggs." So I came over, it's like every day after school for a while, and found another clutch of eggs, dug them up. My mom took me to the library, read books on reptiles as best I could, built some very crude incubator at home, and wound up hatching all of those eggs. So that was kind of my first experience with reptiles. So it just kind of grew in unison.
wow.
With the birds. We had a number of tortoises growing up. And then I was a junior in high school, and I moved out and wasn't able to keep birds anymore. So I was breeding blue and gold macaws and umbrella cockatoos, and had a variety of conures. And
Wow.
couldn't just move out at 16 and bring a collection of parrots, right? That just doesn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
So I sold and traded all of my birds for reptiles because it just seemed more accommodating to what was happening in my life. And I don't think I'd ever owned a snake before. And then over maybe a period of a 2-week period, I had like 80 snakes.
Wow. Holy shit.
I just jumped right in.
Wow. Holy smokes, man. You
Yeah.
know, a little random, but my fiance.
Go ahead, sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was just going to say that my fiance is one of, not to one up, but she's one of 11
Oh,
children.
wow.
Yeah, from a different religious movement in Illinois. But
Oh, okay.
yeah. So actually, maybe we'll have to have a different conversation about offline sometime about some of that stuff. That's pretty intriguing. But so, you know, with the risk of just completely diving right in, because we were having a conversation before the recording and everything,
Sure.
and I don't really think we need to preamble too much. But so, how has your work with aviculture affected your work in herpetoculture? Like, how are the two related? Do you feel like they're terribly, you know, like what are some of the similarities and differences that jump out for you and that you spend time pondering?
So, I mean, there's a lot of behavioral similarities, right? But then there's also a lot of like really interesting, valuable lessons to learn, right? So the Wild Bird Conservation Act in 1992, I want to say, I'm going from memory here, basically shut down the importation of CITES birds to the United States. So you could get a consortium permit and, you know, create a consortium and import birds that were CITES listed that way with a federal permit, but the commercial trade in CITES birds was stopped.
Okay.
And now that created a weird ripple effect throughout aviculture, right? You know, there was the initial knee jerk, we're going to lose everything. But instead, what kind of happened was it shifted towards a captive bred supply for the pet trade. It was overall a fairly healthy shift. There were some weird lessons that took us a long time to learn. You know, I think a lot of species that were hand-fed and imprinted and kept as pets, you know, solitarily for a large portion of their life, oftentimes don't make good breeding stock. You know, we had to learn how to raise captive bred citizens specifically in a way that they would grow and become good breeding stock, right? That whittled some species away. There's also the secondary aspect, which is that much like I think the herpetoculture is dealing with now, you know, you start aggregating all of these different species, particularly, you know, wild caught stuff mixed in. You start having viral viruses pop up, viruses start spreading from collection to collection, wiping collections out, that sort of thing started happening. You got to develop PCRs, you have to get the funding for the science. Apologize, I need to take a break really quick. 1 second.
No problem, it's cool. I'm intrigued by that, the little bit about raising birds to become good breeders, because the pet ones don't become interesting breeders. Because I've kind of felt similarly with regard to the Euros. I was just telling Roy, Jordan, that I'm intrigued by what you said. I know you were on a specific train and I don't want to derail that.
No, you're good.
But you were talking about how certain birds, when they were raised as pets and hand-fed and all this other stuff, they perhaps weren't very good breeders. And I don't know that this is...
It's not a universality, of course. I want to make that
sure. Yeah, and I don't think it's a one-to-one comparison, but I have long felt that a good Euromastix is a spicy one. You know what I mean?
Sure.
I like the more relaxed and friendly and you know, puppy dog like a Euromastix is, the kind of less vigorous, less not always as you say, but it's just aren't always great breeders. Is it sort of a similar?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe this isn't the best example, but you kind of don't learn how to not be an asshole unless you get punched in the face once or twice. And I think that there's a maturing process for a lot of wild animals that's not entirely dissimilar to that. And, you know, if you're raising up a bunch of, particularly, let's say, Indonesian white cockatoos, right? Umbrellas, or Moluccans, or anything kind of in that group, you sticking 20 babies, whether they were hand fed or not, in a large cage directly after weaning and letting them mature together, there's a lot of behavioral cues, lines you learn not to cross that just don't happen as a house pet. And it winds up teaching the bird a lot that you just can't do. And I think that there's probably corollaries in herpetoculture. Particularly, I mean, Uromastyx are solitary animals.
Yeah.
You know, you raise a solitary animal that's never had to defend itself from the smallest incursion of any kind, and just gets food brought to it on a plate every day, and its cage is maybe a little too small, but the two places it can sit are absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah, it probably doesn't have a lot of vigor.
Yeah. No, that's dead on. That's it's a challenge, especially the solitary part, because, you know, this is something that I am always toying with my Uromastyx, in the sense that even though I encourage everybody who asks me anyway to house their Euros solo for most of the year, I also don't think it needs to be like solitary confinement, right? Because
Sure.
I want them to learn how to interact with one another and get the opportunity to kind of exercise that interaction and not go totally insane, and you know, try to be more vigorous and get more you know, psychological engagement with other members of their same species, you know. And it
Well,
becomes
there's probably an interesting corollary there with the bird world, which is that there probably should be two trains of thought, right? If someone wants to buy a pet ornate, there should be a general idea of how you raise a good pet ornate, and that there's nothing wrong with that. If you want to have a tame, chill pet ornate, as long as it's well cared for, have one, and help them do that. But if you want to raise a future breeding stock, maybe there should be a different system in place for doing that. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have to be an either or for what everybody does.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so one of the things we were talking about before the recording was the way in which your experience with dogs, working with different dogs, and kind of growing up and learning about different dog breeds and how they've been managed and mismanaged over the years has kind of played into how somewhat how you think about herpetoculture.
Totally.
And I'm intrigued by that too, because I've thought, you know, so I think that, you know, what we're doing with reptiles is a kind of domestication to a certain extent. And I mean, obviously, just bear with me here on this. It's not like a perfectly fleshed out concept, but I think some of what we're doing with reptiles to a certain extent is a kind of domestication. Now, obviously, dogs, horses, chickens, all these other things have a different utility and relationship with humans. And I think that so those reasons for domestication are obviously quite different than reptiles, because we're not domesticating them for food or to work for us or to take us anywhere or anything like that. But I'm curious, well, what your thoughts are on some of the stuff I just said.
So I would suggest domestication is a very long process.
Okay.
And herpetoculture, particularly in the vein of success, is a fairly recent phenomenon. So I think it'd be a little preemptive to suggest that what we're doing is domestication. Maybe I'm being a little semantical, but I view it more as we're laying the groundwork for which species will go on to become domesticated. And then there will probably be a fairly large division from that, right? And what is or isn't, but what is, you know, there will be species which are not domesticated but are continued to be maintained and bred, right? You know, I would imagine if you're to take a group, an obvious group, right? Something like Ackies or water monitors, with, you know, huge representation in the trade, very likely species or candidates to be domesticated at some point. Species like blue-tail monitors, which I don't know if they've even ever actually been bred in captivity, not so likely, right? So there will be a division like that, I'm sure. As far as, I don't know that there is a requisite utilitarian component to domestication. I think it has always been the motivating factor for why a species was historically domesticated, right?
Mhm.
But I don't think that those, just because that was why it was done. I mean, we have a lot more surplus as a species now, and we can domesticate things just because we want to, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's no utilitarian aspect to houseplant, really.
Yeah. Right.
And you know,
It's aesthetic. It's an aesthetic
Mhm.
component.
sure, or whatever motivating factor, right?
Yeah.
We can, I guess, play God a little bit with things if we're so inclined.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, and I guess my thinking on this is, I agree with you that it maybe, obviously domestication was probably not the most specific apt term, because that's a broad, long process, as you say. And I agree that what we're doing is kind of like the initial
Yeah,
groundwork
totally.
for what that's going to become, right?
I agree with that.
And I've thought a lot about, you mentioned plants, and I thought about like corn and soy, but there's also like cats.
Sure.
You know, cats don't. You know, everybody says it's like, oh, we had them around for pest control. It's like, kind of. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah, they ate the mice that ate our stuff, but
Yeah, just like with dogs, I mean, there was a diverse set of reasons with each culture, right?
yeah, right.
Right.
And so, you know, I wonder about, you know, what purposes we might generate for why certain reptiles may or may not be domesticated, you know. And
Mhm.
it's something that you know, because I wonder about, people always, you know, people talk about it as this is what we're doing, we're domesticating stuff. And I've heard the argument that cats domesticated themselves, you know, like we didn't really do it until we started breeding them intentionally and specifically making adjustments to the way a cat looks and the way a cat kind of functions and behaves.
I would suggest there's an argument to be made that is what domestication is,
Okay.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
You know, having a population of animals subsisting off of us secondarily
Yeah.
for however long the period of time is, may arguably not be domestication, right?
Okay.
I don't know. I mean, I think there's a nuance there that perhaps
Mhm.
people more informed about the history of cats, right, would know.
Yeah.
But I think that um, you see it in domestic cat breeds, right?
Yeah.
And you see it in domestic dog breeds. I mean, there's a breed from Uruguay called a Cimarron, right? And basically, what was it? I think it was a Llano Espanol were brought over and became feral. And you had this huge population of these feral dogs in Uruguay. And they had no relationship with mankind, with humans, right?
Yeah.
Other than that they were hunted. And they were a problem. And when they'd hunt them, they'd clip off the ear and then present that for the bounty, right?
Right.
And then some people, likely foreigners, came and saw them and went, "Those are cool,"
Yeah.
and generated interest. And now it's a breed that's, you know, kept as a pet and bred. And they cut the ear off, rounded, as an homage of the breed's history, right?
Yeah.
I think that's remarkably different for like as an origin story from, say, like a French bulldog, right?
Sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think there's
Yeah. It's fascinating stuff because, you know, I wonder, you know, I love the people who frame domestication as an adaptation, right? Like I love the idea that,
certainly can be.
yeah, or, you know,
Mhm.
I'm not necessarily trying to have any particular opinion about
Sure.
the solidity of this position or the factual nature of this position at all. It's just
Sure.
like, it's an interesting kind of thought experiment to think about, you know, reptilian domestication as maybe a like a failsafe against you know, wild elimination. Obviously, that's totally
That's a topic I find interesting.
yeah, okay.
Yeah, I mean, what herpetoculture's role is
Yeah,
in the
Mhm.
concept of conservation, because I
yeah,
feel like that's a
Yeah.
weirdly framed and often poorly considered topic in herpetoculture.
well,
Agreed.
you should
Yeah.
could you expand on that a little more, because you also, so one of the notes that we had when we were talking about about stuff we wanted to discuss. One of the notes was conservation versus preservation.
Sure.
So can you talk a little bit about that?
So let's step back a touch.
Sure.
Because I feel like it's very easy for people to go, that's not true, I don't do that.
Okay.
So when we're talking about herpetoculture, we should probably frame what that means.
Okay.
And I treat it sort of the way that US Arc would treat it if they're going on Capitol Hill.
Okay.
It's everybody.
Yeah.
It's all of us.
Yeah.
It's the good, the bad, the ugly, it's all of us.
Yeah, sure.
So just because you're a guy that only breeds ball pythons and you keep your stuff super clean and nice and tidy and you're ethical about what you do and your collection's NIDO tested and you're the cream of the crop, doesn't mean that herpetoculture isn't also other things.
Right.
Sure.
Exactly.
Sure.
So I also don't classify herpetoculture as a national thing, right? Herpetoculture is global.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
So when you take into all those factors as kind of your ground for it, I've kind of always taken issue with the idea that we're involved in conservation in any meaningful way. And there are, don't get me wrong. I don't want to take away from the handful of people who are doing good work, who are affiliated with herpetoculture and then funding actual conservation projects. There's a really cool Charles Bogarty project. There's a handful of others. But as a whole, what we do has nothing to do with conservation. If anything, it's ecologically detrimental. And if you lay out, and I mean, get ahead of myself a little bit here, but if you lay out all of the logical reasons herpetoculture is good, and I'm a proponent of those, most of them, if not all, are just mitigating the damage we do already. Which that gets a little messy, a little uncomfortable to unpack, but I would suggest that there is a distinction between what we do and what conservation is. And the simplest way to frame that is we preserve things, we don't conserve them. And I think that's because in order to conserve things, I think that's more of an ecological term. And this may not be the most fleshed out framing, but to me, that makes the most sense.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's intriguing. So, could you were saying, all right, here there are some solid arguments that what we do helps with on some level with conservation, and then I guess what I'm trying to ask is, could you kind of give could you steel man the argument that say opposes yours, that says here's why this is really valuable from a conservation perspective, and then maybe you could say here's why I don't agree with that argument? Or is that maybe a little bit?
Yeah, no, I get you. I think I hate speaking for other people, so I'm hesitant to say this is what they say, right?
Yeah, sure.
So I want to make that clear. I do think that there is a recurring argument. I've seen enough to feel comfortable kind of restating it to some degree. I think it was really commonly used when Lanthanotus started coming in. Europeans specifically were making memes. There was a lot of attention on that one, right? And there is a logical argument that they're making, which is that if the Indonesian government isn't going to do anything to stop the deforestation of Borneo, all we're doing is moving Lanthanotus out of the way of tractors that are coming in to plant palm oil.
Sure.
So how is taking Lanthanotus out of the wild, where they're under imminent threat, a bad thing? I don't view that as an honest argument. There are a number of reasons for it. One is if your primary intention was conservation, putting lizards in a suitcase and smuggling them back and selling them for 10 grand a pair.
Yeah.
I don't see how you're conserving anything, how you're making a
Yeah.
positive impact. If anything, you're just making matters worse. You're just taking breeding stock out of the wild that may have been one of the few populations that would have survived deforestation. There was no effort done with the proceeds of profits to help in the region. I don't view that as a sound justification to make matters worse in the wild, right?
Yeah.
So you have things like that. I think the concept of conservation through commercialization is an interesting one. I think crested geckos are a really good example of that, right? So we thought they were rare. We thought they were extinct, and we thought they were rare. Some came in largely legally, and then they became one of the poster species for commercial viability of a reptile in captivity.
Yeah.
What we've seen over the past decade, probably mostly over the past 5 or 6 years, is that the captive success of Urodactyloides agricolae, Urodactyloides velardi, Auriculatus, Chahua, some of the offshore Leachianus, has just gone on to fuel more poaching in New Caledonia, right? I mean, U.S. Fish and Wildlife is trying to stamp out very authentically and legally origin captive bred Urodactyloides because so much illicit trade is happening in other species in the genus. And they're seizing exports that they shouldn't seize because they don't know how to put out this fire that's happening. There's tons of illicit trade out of New Caledonia that's come as a byproduct of the captive success of New Caledonian species, including Ciliatus, including Auriculatus, stuff that has no justification, right? Other than, it'd be cool to have locality ones.
Yeah, sure.
Even the success stories have negative consequences on ecology. And again, I mean, to unpack the concept further, the conservation through commercialization. I'm not trying to pick on Tom here. I know Tom came up with it. I think it was a great slogan. I think that there is a fundamental truth to the idea. I like Tom, but doesn't mean it's beyond picking apart a little bit. Particularly, I think, because it's in the public domain at this point. It's not just Tom's. He came up with it. It's a herpetoculture slogan now.
Totally.
But I think if you pick it apart a little bit more and pull on that thread, is there an argument to be made that the success of chickens in captivity has an impact on wild jungle fowl, or the success of domestic cats has an impact on wildcats, African wildcats, or gray wolves from dogs, or so on and so forth, right? Obviously, maybe regionally a handful of people kill less jungle fowl. They can, breed chickens, but now people want jungle fowl. It's cool that they were like an origin species for chickens too, right? So there is that aspect, which is that what we do doesn't have a lot of or arguably any positive impact on nature unless we do that with intent, right? It's not good enough to just say, I'm doing this, thus it's good because I like it. We have to, if we want to have a positive impact on ecology as a community, then you have to do that mindfully and with intent. That's all.
So, I agree with that.
So there's some interesting stuff that you just pointed out there. So the first stuff you were mentioning with the Borneo earless monitors sort of smacked of like vigilante justice in a way. It's like, if nobody's going to do anything about it, I'm going to do something about it, right? And then, it
was nobody knew where they were. And then one asshole from Germany flew over there and was able to find them because he piggybacked with a biologist.
Oh, sure.
And then basically, from what I've been told, threatened to kill him and took the animals that had been found and then made additional trips. I mean, it's the same guy that went down and hit Bill Hayes' Cyclura site down in the Bahamas, and they're bad people. These are monsters. Hitting the Galapagos, and
Right. Well, so
real bad players out there.
yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I guess I meant the rationale, right? Like the rationale that people will use for, okay, if nobody else, Borneo is not going to protect their habitat, we're going to take them and put them in a box, and we're going to, because then it'll at least preserve them or what have you. That sounds to me a little bit like vigilante justice in some regard. That's kind of what I was
Sure.
at there. And then there's this
but then pull on that thread a bit more, right?
Yeah.
As a guy who breeds Uromastyx,
yeah,
you've seen what the conversion rate is on, use Egyptians as an example, or ornates. I think ornates are a better success story, so the numbers skew a little bit more in their favor, right? Your conversion rate of how many ornates have come in from the wild versus how many get produced in captivity. Or how many just survive to maturity or what have you. Do we have a sustainable, viable population of ornates in captivity today?
I'm working on it.
if imports stop tomorrow, is there one? And I mean, I think there's some flaw to like what do I have it here? It's like a MVP. So there's this conversion rate that ecologists use, and so there's a MPV. So it's not the best method, right? You need a lot of data and a lot of computing systems to come up with an accurate species-specific bloodline diversity requirement for a captive population, right?
Sure.
But as a general rule of thumb, 5,500 is what most people have gone with. So that's 50 distinct breeding bloodlines for a species to have a future. Now, they say that species that are more sedentary and lower yield tend to require more diversity, which is kind of counterintuitive, than species that are higher, more explosive breeders, right?
Yeah.
So maybe Galapagos tortoises would be at one end and red-eyed tree frogs at the other. Right?
Yeah, sure.
So maybe galops are 50 and red eyes are 12, right?
Yeah.
But if you put Uromastyx maybe firmly in the middle, I think would be fair. 25. Are there 25 established bloodlines of ornates viably breeding in captivity at this point in time? Maybe.
How do you define a distinct, viable, established bloodline?
There you go, right?
Yeah.
It gets pretty in depth pretty quickly, right?
Yeah, because here I can say safely that I have at least that many unrelated import adults that are 100% healthy, breeding readily, and seem totally fine, and I have their offspring. Now,
so you have 25 breeding adults, so at that point, I mean, you can mix and match, right? But more or less, you're probably cutting that down to 2/3 of that, right?
Yep.
Because once you pair them, now that's a bloodline. Once you pair these, now that's a bloodline.
Yeah.
And the idea behind that is generally that you need a lot of people working with a species at varying levels, right? For a species to have any path forward long term. So just to step back before we go way off the rails here, that wasn't the result for Lanthanotus, right?
Right.
Rob Nixon has done well, and he's made a few clutches. I think Richard Cazares made a clutch. I think someone in Canada made a clutch or two.
One of our guests, one of our previous guests, Brian Minna, has he on the show. He was telling us about he's got eggs incubating right now.
There you go. So there's this handful, right? Of people that have done have had some level of success with them. Does the species have a viable path currently in captivity? Precarious at best. So this argument that we're kind of rushing into a burning house to save them, it also falls a little flat there. Because there wasn't a concerted effort, right? There was a concerted effort to preserve the species in captivity. There was a concerted effort to profiteer from it. And I brought some in. I mean, I'm throwing myself under the bus here, right? You grow and you develop and you reconsider and evaluate your positions on things. but it's, it's certainly one that, I think I was on the wrong side of. But, Lanthanotus also have a flip side of that story, which is that the Indonesian government went on to give them a quota. So as long as they're captive bred, they have a quota. So now they're coming out again legally with documents. And they had, despite what the Guardian and people on Facebook say, they did legally leave Malaysia.
Sure.
And Malaysia owns part of Borneo. I've seen the documents. The animals I brought in were from that origin. They were not all smuggled, despite what people on Facebook say.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean legal and ethical inherently align either.
Right.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
And I'm sorry, Roy. I know
that's okay.
I've just been going on and on, but I also think, I mean, I don't know. I kind of get the sense that, so there's all these broad overarching narratives that people will use to justify what we do or how we do it, or
that's all these,
and some of them are maybe a little more sound than others. Some of them are maybe clearly straw man or arguments, but it seems like these are the arguments that we need to have, that these are the iterations that we have to go through in order to land on a, maybe in 50 to 100 years. I mean, I'm just spitballing here, but in order to land on a well-defined, well thought out, well systematized and institutionalized methodology, right? I mean,
I think that's
no
ambitious.
Okay.
I mean, I think that there's an individualistic aspect that is sort of inherent with people that are drawn towards any sort of agriculture or farming practices, which is what I would argue herpetoculture is, right? It's urban farming.
Totally.
And I think people who are a bit more individualistic, a bit less aligned with social norms and that sort of thing, not only are the primary demographic for that, but then the subset of herpetoculturists from that group are even more that way. So expecting there to be some philosophical commonality within this group, I personally don't see that as a likelihood.
Is that would that be, is that like, and again, I'm not not accusing you of anything at all, but
I want you to push back.
Is that cynicism or lack of imagination, or is that like, because I don't disagree with you on a certain level, right? Like there's not, it is individual, it is an individualistic pursuit, and it is in some ways an aesthetic one, and all of that, but it doesn't, I kind of lost my train of thought here, sorry, but
take your time.
I feel like one could conceivably make that argument about much of what we do as a culture, as a society. A huge amount of what we do is sort of individualistic, and
are you talking about our species or America?
Yeah, I'm talking about as a species. So much of what we do is like a near-term focus. It's immediate return focus because we're programmed to be immediate return animals. That's what we are. We're not long-term. I mean, we do a good job of mitigating that and becoming more long-term thinkers with time, with practice, with influence, but
I think that's just the dissipation of being overridden by hormones when we're young. If we just get older and
yeah, that's right. Exactly.
We aren't just responding to just firing synapses. And, I don't know. I don't know that I agree with the premise that we're wholly individualistic as a species. I think there's a lot of foundational arguments to be made that wasn't our origin story, and that globally it's regionally variable, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I'm hesitant to suggest that that's species wide. I do think that American culture tends to be more individualistic than some other cultures.
Sure.
But just because that's true, I mean, there's a wide gradient, right? Globally for our species, and then, you know, within the States as well. All I'm suggesting is that herpetoculture historically has been kind of an outlier thing. It's become more mainstream, and with that has brought more mainstream people. But historically, it's been, you know, kind of the odd man out thing to do.
Yeah.
And with that has brought the
Definitely.
kind of person who's an odd man out.
Yeah.
And to your point, you know, as it has become more mainstream and brought more mainstream people, maybe that will change.
Yeah.
I don't suspect in any real meaningful way, but I mean, we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
As
Sure.
far as like some sort of homogenous philosophy, I mean, there isn't homogenous philosophy in like any major political party, right?
Totally.
So lumping together a group of people that their only thing they have in common is they think lizards are cool, snakes are cool, or tortoises are cool. That might be all we have in common with one another.
Sure. Sure.
And then we don't even necessarily agree on what that means.
Right. Right. Well, and I guess I wonder, yeah, you're right. It's sort of an ambitious concept, but like, you know, I don't know what, you know, I get, you know, you could even make the argument to a certain extent, like what more do we need other than that commonality, right? I mean, you know, it's sort of up to us to articulate the framework through which we want to move forward as a group.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like anything else, right? You take a large swath of people and you find the people you vibe with, right?
Yeah.
You know, you don't need, everybody doesn't need to agree on everything.
Yeah, sure.
Disagreement and discourse is the foundation of thought.
I demand you agree with me, Jordan.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing more thoughtless than someone who views things that way.
Yeah, sure.
Jordan seems really receptive to that kind of demand.
Totally. Yeah. If anything's gonna persuade him at all, it's my demand. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, if your ambitions are, you know, to see, I don't recall who said this, but many years ago, back when the carpet python community was really having a lot of like internal battles about the future of carpet pythons. People who are very against hybrids, people who are against morphs, people who were supportive of that stuff, and so on and so forth. It was happening all the time. Those guys were just arguing about everything. And it almost became what that community was for a brief period of time. Someone in the midst of that said something to the effect of, you know, I don't like hybrids. I don't necessarily like the morphs. But if I like diamond pythons, that's my thing. And I don't want to see diamond pythons lost to what's occurring. Then I'll breed pure diamond pythons and I'll work on preserving that species in herpetoculture.
Yeah.
This is more or less his point, though. If I give a shit enough, then it's my job to do that.
Yeah.
And if I don't do that, then clearly I don't give that much of a shit about it. Yeah. I'm just on the internet arguing with people because it's fun for me, right?
Yeah.
And I think that there's a bigger lesson there than I maybe he thought, and it stuck with me, which is that if you care about this stuff, then do it.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that also applies to like the kind of where herpetoculture can also actually influence conservation, which is like if you care about the conservation, contribute to conservation. You know, like consider a percentage of your earnings to go to conservation. You know, I think that's always occurred to me as kind of like the obvious way that herpetoculture can actually have an influence on conservation.
Real conservation too, right?
Exactly. Real conservation. Because there are organizations out there supporting.
There are, and I do think that there is a historical tendency, I'm not going to name names, of people using their money affiliated with herpetoculture to fund projects to gain access.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not conservation. That's one of the most cynical and nihilistic things you can do, right? Like,
Yeah. Totally.
so yeah, I mean, I think that there is a ton that could be done on that front. And I would argue, I mean, you don't have to be wholly altruistic about it. It buys goodwill. You know, if USARK, and I want to be clear here, I throw a lot at USARK's feet. Friends with Phil and a lot of the guys on the board. I don't throw it at their feet for criticism. I support USARK, and you know, I like those guys. Phil's probably the hardest working person I've ever met in my life.
Yeah.
You know, he's like just photos of like Barack Obama when he got elected and when he left office. I feel that way about poor Phil, right? Phil
Yeah, totally.
Where he's just working his ass off for us. So if there's an advocate for Phil, the way Phil's an advocate for herpetoculture, it's me. Like, I got nothing but respect for that guy.
Yeah.
But I think that we as a community have morphed USARK into some sort of like NRA, right?
Yeah, sure.
Right, exactly.
We want them to fix all of our goddamn problems right now, and we don't want to have any consideration about it. Just fix it.
You've got my $5 a month. Fix it.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that USARK has the capacity, right? Just for historical context, there has never been a lobbyist group representing any sort of exotics community that's been successful. And I was a member of the Organization of Professional Aviculturists 20 years ago, long before Andrew and everybody started USARK. And I'm friends with some of the people that are still on the board, and I like them a lot, but they haven't done a 50th or 100th of what Phil's done in the past few years since he took over USARK. No one's been as successful. I mean, PJAC's done a ton, but PJAC is a different bird, right? PJAC predominantly represents Petco and PetSmart, you know, SeaWorld, and that vein of things. So that's put USARK in a really interesting place, right? They've been able to unify herpetoculture and be successful in representing them. I would argue that for that to have like long-term impact in a meaningful way, yeah, there probably should be a wing of USARK that's involved in conservation projects, that's involved in supporting higher education for herpetoculture, right? Like if herpetology is whittled down to, what is it, like 2 schools that offer PhDs in herpetology these days in the States, if that, where's the future on that front for us? You know, I think that I discussed this at Herpeton, having a unified herp club system, right? That acts as like this umbrella base for USARK, and USARK's the spear, would create a lot of power for the community in that front too. So personally, I think having people that are more proactive and involved in expanding, maybe under USARK, to do a lot of these things is not only going to have a positive impact on those specific areas, but it's going to have a positive impact in shaping the narrative of what the future of herpetoculture is.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so the talk you gave at Herpeton, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I'm sure Roy did as well. What was the process of that like for you? Like, was it nerve-wracking? What were some of the considerations that you were trying to make kind of before and after? Like, is there anything about the talk that you gave that you would change? I mean, I'm just really curious about that.
I mean, I haven't gone and relived it, so on that front, I don't know what I would change or not. But yeah, I mean, I hate public speaking. You know, I was so nervous. I left my USB up there and my coffee, and I was supposed to take questions after, and I just walked away. You know, I hate that stuff. Peter Neckis was interrupting almost every speaker in the middle of them speaking. So the whole time I'm talking, I'm just waiting for him to interrupt me and say some assholeish thing. It was terrible. I couldn't wait for it to be over. Yeah, as far as considerations are concerned, it's just like this, right?
Yeah.
You and I are having a conversation, and who knows how somebody at home is going to hear it.
Sure.
They may misunderstand or just simply disagree. And then they're like, fuck that guy. I don't like putting myself out there like that.
They're going to be saying that about me, if anybody.
Nah,
don't worry about it.
Very likable, Phil.
Well, that's because, I appreciate that, but I feel like you two are biased, but how dare you? No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Well, I feel like this stuff is, even though what we've talked about thus far has been extremely interesting, and maybe if maybe a little bit scattered in some way, this kind of stuff is like the really what I want. I love getting into this because for me personally, a lot of my learning and a lot of my problem solving kind of happens out loud. It happens out in the world. I think for a lot of people, it happens up here in their head, right? Sure. And then they think about it and then they spit it out. For me, it kind of happens in real time. So I really, really enjoy this kind of conversation and like getting the chance to bounce ideas off of each other and like learn from people who've thought about this stuff way, way more than I have. I mean, so what do you think? Because I know.
So let's just go full stream of consciousness here.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. God. Well, okay. If we're going to do that. So I know Roy and I have talked a lot about, we have pretty big ambitions with Project Herpetoculture as a concept, and obviously he and I are both, we're still quite young. The show is still super young. How it may or may not proceed is sort of yet to be determined. We're going to be doing these for as long as we get value out of them, right? But we have a lot of ambitions about what we may, what we're considering, what we're thinking about in terms of long-term goals, long-term future stuff. I mean, how do you think we get away from some of the more toxic or the aspects of herpetoculture that maybe aren't serving us very well? I mean,
it's complicated, right? I mean, nothing is simple. I think there's nothing more repellent to me than somebody who's like, oh, the answer is very simple. I mean,
sure.
You're either selling me something or you just don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
But as far as positive paths forward, I mean, obviously mentorship is huge. I grew up in aviculture predominantly, and mentorship in that community is something I was very fortunate to find. Dale Thompson and Gene Hall were always willing to just sit and talk. And these are old guys that had lived through all of it. And they had very interesting approaches, right? I mean, they grew up in aviculture when it was largely a wild-caught trade, right? And after the Wild Bird Conservation Act, I mean, we're talking 5 years after the shutdown, Dale, was working on creating consortiums and bringing in, the first Hoffman's conures and getting them established and having a totally and wholly uncommercial mindset of that. His goal in bringing them in wasn't, I'm going to be the first one to do it and I'm going to make a bunch of money from it. Instead, what he did was he was the first one to do it. He spent a bunch of money doing it and then largely just gave away breeding stock to people he felt were capable and competent in continuing the project. He just literally for free, here, I have faith in you, and gave them offspring. It was a very different model. And I know aviculture wasn't all Dale Thompson's, right? But I was fortunate to have someone like him kind of molding how I saw things from a very young age. And I think that made a positive impact. I mean, I grew up in aviculture and I also grew up in herpetoculture, but I grew up in herpetoculture online, right? So imagine how shitty and stupid you were at 16. I did that in a public arena, right? So there's a lot of kids doing that now, right? They're growing up in like kind of the worst time to be a young herpetoculturist. Where I don't know, having lived it to a lesser extent, I can't imagine being the guy that like just got his first Savannah monitor at a local pet store, and they're posting photos on Instagram and their setup's wrong. And then they go through that really quick learning curve that most of us go through, where it's like, oh, this is so exciting and fun. And they're just digesting information. And then 18 months later, they've moved on and they got a fairly decent setup and they're trying a pair of Hackies. And everyone goes, I remember this asshole. He's the one that got thrashed on Facebook, 18 months ago for, a Savannah monitor on rabbit pellets, right?
Sure.
That's going to create, I think it's going to do a disservice to the future of herpetoculture in a lot of ways. I think that that's kind of happening in unison with an immense amount of information that guys like us didn't have, right? You couldn't go on iNaturalist or go look up the weather of some valley in West Africa or see the rainfall in this specific rocky hillside you like the way you can now, right? So we're simultaneously developing youth that has a lot of pressure to perform and criticism and not a lot of mentorship at the same time as what'll probably be some of the most informed herpetoculturists that have ever existed. Right?
Totally. Yeah.
And it's a weird dynamic that's occurring. What will be the best way to shape that? I don't have a lot of answers because I didn't grow up in that world. That's the world that's happening right now. You do know that being thoughtful and kind and helpful, it helped me.
Yeah. It's a lot of example setting. I mean, I feel I have some slight different view. I mean, I agree with a lot of that, right? There's so much about the barriers that are erected as a result of the way, a Facebook group handles someone who's not doing it the way we think they should be doing it, or somebody new. And all of that stuff is a huge problem. With that said, Roy and I both have talked about this, and it came up a little bit in a couple of our last conversations, which is, I mean, the reality is Roy and I wouldn't be friends. Jordan, you and I wouldn't be friends. The way I understand what I'm doing as a keeper wouldn't be the way it is today were it not for social media. I mean, I've got friends from all over, and I've been able to learn. And it's like, it's kind of, you're right. It's a double-edged sword in a certain way. Yeah. And I wouldn't know about like Burt Langerwerf really if it wasn't for the ability to like Google him a little and find out a little bit. I mean, obviously
he's a very good, interesting example, right? I mean, Burt is an absolute legend.
Yeah.
He's the shoulders we stand upon in some ways, right?
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
He eviscerated on Facebook today. He was one of the quirkiest, weirdest, most interesting people, and he built his cages out of trash, and he had big compost piles for worms that he harvested his food from, and it was chaotic and messy and functional for him in his way. I would lose my mind working in that collection, but it worked for him, right? So he's a good example of someone who probably would be treated badly today, but did a lot of good. I think there's a more interesting thing about Burt, though, which I think goes back to what we were talking about earlier about preservation. So I think that we should probably dive into this a little bit because I do find this interesting.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at, again, let's go back to ornates, right?
Sure.
So if you take a species and you want to see it have a permanent place in herpetoculture, You can't just willy-nilly go, I like this, so it's going to have a permanent place in herpetoculture. Some species do not have viability in that way. There's a ton, I would argue most species don't. And I think that there are some requisite components for that to occur. So as far as how that functions, I tend to think that commercial viability is absolutely necessary. And the reason I say that is that when you're talking about bloodline diversity, right? So let's say we need 3 times the population of ornates represented within our country for ornates to have a pathway, right? Long-term permanent pathway. You're not going to have 3 fills. It's unlikely. Maybe unlikely, right? So what you really need is, a fill and then 4 guys who are like, I really like ornates, I've got 5 pairs. And then you need 20 more guys who are like, I have a pair of ornates and, I breed them. And then that's kind of a carousel, right? So guys hop on, guys hop off, or less, and you will lead 20 guys are breeding a pair, right? Sure. You need that foundation to be supported by consumer demand. If you don't have consumer demand, all of your work basically is to what end, right? And Bert is an example of that in a very interesting way, because Bert was the guy that bred Australian water dragons. He bred them so well and so successfully that no one else did. They were $35 wholesale, $40 wholesale. Pet stores did not do well with them. They were brown. They were spazzy. Not a good retail animal as a hatchling. And when Bert passed, very quickly they went from almost every reptile specialty store having them in stock at least once a year to us needing to import them from Europe to get breeding stock and people starting to build collections again. Sure. And they're still somewhat valuable, and there's still a few $100 each for babies now. That all happened because Bert died. Now, imagine any other species being held up that way, where one guy is the guy that does it. They do it so well that they're commercial, but they overlook building kind of a tiered structure for consumer demand and for other breeders being involved, right? And you'll see how in aviculture and also in herpetoculture, one guy dies or gets a virus in his collection or just decides to call it quits, and that species just vanishes. So exactly. You have that. I mean, you have anytime there's major conflict, if a whole collection or one guy's collection is the source for that species and there's a war, well, that species is gone now, right? Building that commercial viability is, in my mind, one of the most important parts of establishing a species. Sure. Building consumer demand.
This is like right in my wheelhouse at the moment.
Totally.
This is like the idea around commercial viability, what it means for something to be truly established in herpetoculture, how many people have to be participating in that group of animals to make that a long-term viable prospect, how many animals you need in order to have the genetic diversity to make it last past a few generations. All of that and much, much more has been stuff that's been floating around in my head here for the last 3 to 5 in a way that every year a new consideration pops up. Like we did
every time we talk on the phone, this is predominantly what we talk about.
We had one of our first episodes, I think it was like our second one, was with, or no, third maybe, was with Eric Haycraft, and he was talking about, it was the second one. Okay, thanks, man. He was talking about how he was trying to figure out why so many captive bred sailfin dragons didn't have, or basilisks, excuse me, my bad. Their sails weren't developing properly, right?
Okay. And they're not green, right? They're like turquoise.
Something, lots of differences, right? And
almost every green lizard, you'll notice, you know, whether it's
Well,
green tree monitor or a basilisk, you know, we just don't offer the carotenoids that they do in the wild. It's a
Exactly.
Right.
key indicator.
Yep.
You see someone with captive bred baby green tree monitors online and they're green,
yeah, captive bred. Yeah.
check for a ring around their neck from when they got noosed out of a tree.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Exactly.
those kinds of considerations, because I've been breeding ornates for just north of 10 years.
Mhm.
And, you know, not as of yet, but I know that something is going to present itself as, oh, hey, you didn't consider this.
Mhm.
Not because I didn't intentionally avoided anything, but because you can't know until you get there, you know?
Sure. And then there's stuff like genetic drift, right? You'll have an ornate that you're like, that is the nicest ornate I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And then you wind up with like Genghis Khan siring your whole collection of ornates, right?
Yes.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you know, I've been trying to develop protocols here at the shop and become as informed as I possibly can about other animals that have undergone the transition to permanence in captivity, just to try to inform and try to safeguard what I'm doing here. And it's like, this doesn't even begin to consider what happens if next year nobody wants ornates, you know, like what happens if nobody wants
I think
ornates,
you're in an interesting and rather fortunate position
Yeah.
in that you are recognizing a lot of these things while there's still kind of a permeable layer of genetic diversity coming in on Uromastyx.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
We've seen kind of whack-a-mole with Uromastyx where
Oh yeah.
species X is $4 for, you know, X amount of years, and then they just stop coming in, right?
Yep.
And that's just happened over and over and over. And it's put guys like you in a really good spot where you can go, oh, I see this happening, right? This is there is clearly a direction this is all going, but the public likes Uromastyx, right? It's not a genus that you have to convince the public to like.
Yeah. I'm not. Right.
And that gives them a path forward. All it's going to take is a bunch of dedicated people.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and there's another way that this has become relevant, at least for me anyway, which is the Xenogama, you know, because
Sure.
I think that Xenogama taylori are an absolute knockout for herpetoculture. Like it should, from my perspective, they're an obvious, excellent choice for their size, for the fact that they are so easy to provide a very, very good baseline standard of care for a number of animals, partially because of their size, but partially because of they're just not that complicated, and their dietary requirements are relatively minimal. I mean, just in terms of content, right?
Totally.
You know,
I mean, I think that
don't need
when
that much
you're building a species place in captivity, if your local mom and pop pet store or Petco can maintain offspring well enough to sell them to the public, that species likely has a permanent place in herpetoculture.
Yeah,
Right.
but they don't.
It's durable.
The difference with the Xenogama is that they don't have the baseline. Like an ornate is a fucking desert ground dwelling panther chameleon. They're a miraculous visual spectacle, right?
Sure.
So a Xenogama is not that. They are they're cool and they're interesting and their tails are incredible, and the cobalt blue that males get when they want to breed is an absolute knockout.
Sure.
And this is where I drift into controversial territory. This is where I think this makes them excellent candidates for being introduced into, you know, bringing morphs into the game. Now, obviously, there's big problems there, right? Like that
has to happen, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
You got to get the ring lottery ticket before this conversation has any real meaning, right?
Yeah. Right.
Sure.
Totally. And I'm not suggesting that this is like the right answer. I'm not saying that this is like what I really desperately want to do with Xenogama, but I'm just iterating on the idea that, you know, you mentioned ornates as an obvious standout. In my mind, the Xenogama are an obvious standout, but if I'm, I'm going to have to, I feel like it's going to be a much more of an uphill battle in terms of
I'll
building.
push back on that a touch, which is that bearded dragons received wide success and popularity and commercial success long before they were pretty.
Okay.
It's true.
And their big cool factor was they had a spiky throat.
Yeah.
I mean, I bought bearded dragons early, like in the 90s when they had value as a normal bearded dragon. I think I traded a baby cockatoo I made for a handful of babies. And I remember being a kid and just being like, this is the coolest shit ever, this big spiky throat. Xenogama have that with their tail, right?
And the blue.
And
true.
I don't know that morphs are necessary for that to be cool to a kid, right? Which if you're going for commercial viability, your target audience is, at that level of commercial viability is first-time buyers,
right.
And if they do indeed make a reasonably decent first-time pet reptile,
they do.
All you need is that one thing for that kid or teenager or young adult to go, that's pretty cool. I like that.
True.
With time, you get lighter versions or, more blue or whatever it is. Okay, great. Now there's some diversity and you can appeal to the guy who's like, I really like those. I remember having one, but I want a nice one.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily need an albino.
Right? Yeah, no, sure. And I'm not suggesting that that's like the necessary next step or anything. It's just like, I've been really enjoying getting into this section of thought, for everything that I do, because, one of the things that I'm finding is that every year that goes by, I'm just finding more and more interesting problems and challenges and subjects to tackle. And it's this self-sustaining, whereas in other industries that I've been involved in, specifically like when I was involved in illustration and concept art, great fun, very difficult to do. It takes a lot of skill, but profoundly boring as you're a wrist, you're a production, you're just a printer, and you're not really, except at the very, very highest levels, you're not allowed to infuse your creativity or your preferences or anything into what you're doing. Whereas herpetoculture is like a mixture of not just influencing my own creativity and preferences into what I do, but you're also counterbalancing that against the well-being of the animals that you're working with, considering their future, considering the impact of what you're doing broadly. I mean, there's just so many different angles to come at the same problem. And
you can drive yourself crazy.
That's right. And I definitely don't want to go crazy, but I don't necessarily have like a well-defined thing that I'm heading towards here. And I really want to give, I feel like I've just been talking over Roy this whole time.
Man.
And part of it's because I'm a super talkative person. So I just want to I'm going to kick the ball over to you, Roy.
It's good, man. It's good. We just have different processing speeds, and yours is like, you're just going at a different rate than I am.
I think I just spit shit out.
But but no, I think about this subject a lot, just like the whole viability thing, with the stuff that I'm working with here. And obviously I'm a hobbyist, I'm not working at a broad scale, but I do feel passionate about some of the species I'm working with, in particular the Polychrus, and feel like there is potential commercial viability, not like at the mom and pops kind of scale like you're talking about. Although, I mean, in my experience, the captive bred and born babies are really bulletproof. So far, I haven't lost a single one.
Hell yeah.
Just to step back for a second, I mean, I think it's not necessary for everything to become a budgie, right?
Yeah,
right.
There are varying degrees of permanent success, and that success could just be a diehard group of people who keep a genus or species going, right?
Totally. Yeah, and that's kind of what I'm hoping for with the Polychrus, is like just a good few dedicated people to get on board, and just keep them going, because they're really amazing lizards.
I get it, man. I mean, that's more or less my attitude with my hornbills.
I
mean, there's no commercial viability in African hornbills. I hesitant to even trust anyone to keep one as a pet. You know, but I would love to play Atlas for how many ever years I have left, and you know, hold up as many species as I have the space and finances to work with, right? I just love them. You know, but again, I mean, I like animals more than people, right? I mean, animals were my escape from people. So there's like 3 or 4 people and reptiles I talk to. I just kind of keep to myself and do my thing. And
rarefied air over here, Roy.
What's that?
So this is a rarefied air over here. That's awesome. Love it.
So the appeal of commercial viability in a reptile project to me is huge, right? If I could just go clean poop and feed animals and enjoy my reptile collection and wholesale everything and not talk to anybody, oh, that's totally the goal.
Okay.
I like the animals. I don't like any the other parts of this so much. But then, you know, I have a handful of other projects that are more like what you're talking about, right? That are they're things that they give me personal satisfaction in a way that maybe breeding king snakes or bull snakes doesn't.
Those are sick though, by the way.
I enjoy them. No, I totally enjoy them. There's nothing wrong with them, but hatching out a clutch of bull snakes is not exactly like a monumental occasion where it's like, holy shit, I can't believe I helped get that done. You know, it's still exciting. I mean, I can see a clutch of red-eared sliders hatching and be like, oh, cool. You know, I'm still a little bit of a kid about this. But, you know, stuff like the Defensor, I know you're hurdles with that species. You know, I'm years in and just got a clutch this year, and you know, lost the eggs, and you know, there's no place for that species in herpetoculture. They're a fucking nightmare. I mean, you and I are fairly experienced keepers. There's no way I'd sell one to someone as a pet and expect that to be like a good situation. You know, but at the same token, I'd like to breed them and have some success and try my best to spread them around to competent people.
Right. Well,
totally.
I made the decision recently, and I've aired this out a little bit on the show before, but at least next year, possibly the year after, I'm just not going to bother breeding the Egyptians.
You
know, it's like
just because of the imports.
Say again.
Because of all the imports coming.
No. I mean, the demand is still there. People still hit me up for them all the time. It's just that, and I'm really, really fortunate that a huge number of the babies that I've sold have gone to people who still have them and caring for them in great big enclosures with a great deal of dedication. I just am not convinced that number is going to stay very big for very long. You know, they're huge animals. They need a lot of space. It doesn't mean there's not a group of people out there who are dedicated to doing that.
All you need to do is convince all the guys buying water monitors and black throats to scale back their ambitions a hair. And
like, I know it's really fun to feed this animal an entire turkey, but have you thought about just putting in a bale of hay and watching him eat that? You know, like, it's maybe not quite as interesting, but
oh, by the way, how are you coping with this this lettuce shortage going on? Jesus, it's killing me. I can't imagine on your end.
You know what? It's a mixed bag. So on the one hand, it's winter, so a lot of the animals here aren't eating that much. So my needs have gone down. A lot of Euros can eat hay and eat some dry stuff, and then I can throw in. So I'm able to like spread that butter a lot more thinly over the toast, as it were.
Yeah, I've been planting parts of the yard with like clover and winter rye, preparing for this as the prices have gone up. But
yeah. And then I'm really lucky that in Colorado there's a lot of wild plants that grow in the warm season that I can feed to the Euros. I have a mother who, her backyard is just full of shit that when I lived there, she would plant flowers just that all the Euros can eat. So,
nice.
So the whole yard is overgrown with stuff that I can go pick if I need to. And then, you know, it's just, it's challenging. Yeah. The price, it's incredible to watch the price for 3 heads of lettuce literally triple, or, you know, go from like $6 to $15 in a week or two.
Yeah.
fucking crazy. But
yeah, I mean, my overhead on produce is lower than yours, but a few $100 a month.
I don't know,
And,
man. You got some tortoises.
yeah, and they eat a lot, but it's a few $100 a month to feed the tortoises and the birds and the iguanas. And it did like a 400% price increase here over the past 6 weeks, which is just like, okay, that's impactful. That sucks.
Just a little bit.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a problem. It's really, it's a consideration. It's something that comes up a lot, but and not to jump around too much, but the Egyptians, this is one of the things, I have my adults in 8.5 foot long by 5 foot pens, and that's a great size, but it's not big enough.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, that that's like the razor's edge of like, you don't want to go smaller.
And they're doing nothing but getting bigger. They are still growing.
Yeah.
They grow for a long time. They're gonna be huge animals. Now, I am very lucky that I have plenty of room here, and I have construction quite literally underway right now to grow their space. But it's hard. They're a big animal with a lot of considerations, and they're not as big as a green iguana or a blackthroat or
Can I make a recommendation to you?
No. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Don't stop pairing them. You're feeding them and paying for the electricity anyways. Pair them and donate all the offspring to zoos and build relationships within the AZA.
Okay. That's a consideration I had not.
Building relationships within the AZA is a very good thing to do for a number of reasons.
Well, I have been. So again, I've been in. So I've dealt with 4, maybe 5 AZA institutions, and I would like to increase that number, of course.
Sure.
I had not considered that was an option. I didn't know I could just donate. I didn't know that was in the cards.
Just reach out to the curators at different reptile zoos that
okay,
or even keepers,
Yeah.
and go, hey, do you or any of the zoos have interest in doing an Egyptian exhibit? I want to donate some babies this year. They'll get back to you. A lot of them would be like stoked to do it.
Okay,
very cool.
I'm definitely gonna keep. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna
reach out. San Francisco Zoo. Reach out to Dom Dorsa. I know he'll say yes.
Okay. You're. I'm gonna write that down.
I'll text it to you.
Well, still, okay. Well, all right. Well,
I'll
fine.
text you.
That's fine. Yeah, please, because
this could be a good path for the sulphureus here potentially.
Oh, totally.
Those are beautiful, man. I love those snakes. Those are some badass.
Yeah, they're super cool.
Amazing snakes.
Yeah, that whole genus is rad.
Oh, Spilotes, yeah, my favorite snakes.
Yeah,
probably.
Super cool.
I mean, there's amazing snakes out there. Actually, I have some eggs that are at 89 days right now. So
what is their incubation?
It could be any day now. So it depends
cool.
on temperature, of course. But like I've heard anywhere from like 84 to 100 days.
Okay. You hatched some a few years ago, right?
I hatched some when I was 16. It's the first snakes I ever hatched.
Oh, cool.
So it's been a really long time. And then I actually have one of the snakes that I hatched, I got back.
Is your male, right?
Yeah, the male. Yeah. And he's pretty much geriatric now. So last year I got a clutch and they went full term, but babies didn't hatch. They were deformed, not fully developed. And I think that the potential there was parthenogenesis. Because I never witnessed any sort of courtship, and I'm kind of curious if that's going to happen again this year. It's a different female.
Shocking how commonly that's proved to happen.
Yeah,
I know. I'm really, really curious if they do end up hatching. I mean, either way, if they don't hatch, I'm going to try and find somebody to send them to figure out like, hey, is this parthenogenesis? But if they do hatch, it'd be interesting to explore that too.
Talking about the correlations between aviculture and herpetoculture, that right there is interesting because we're finally starting to catch up on that front. We're years behind forever, and now we're getting PCRs for different diseases, DNA sexing. I think Morph Market recently launched, for this joint venture. I think they help finance for testing genetics on ball pythons, which has tons of really cool implications for expanding that and defining maybe more ambiguous subspecies of things. Like I know with a lot of the imported testudo Seems like there's been some problems on that front.
Mhm.
I mean, I know that there is existing access to that, but having it be affordable and easily accessible, uh, massively impactful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
It's
Yeah.
really super cool. So what is this was also something in the notes, and I'm totally unfamiliar with this concept. What is the Rosemary Lowe philosophy of specialization?
Okay. So when I was a little kid, I was part of the Orange County Bird Breeders Club, right?
Okay.
Mhm.
So it was like once a month, my mom would drive me down and drop me off, and a bunch of old people would sit around and talk about birds, right?
Yeah.
We'd
Yeah.
have like a little auction or something at the end and raise money. And then once a year, we'd have speakers, every month, but like once a year, we'd do an event, raise a bunch of money, and bring in someone kind of, more elevated within the community.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it must have been maybe 8 or 9. And we brought over Rosemary Lowe to speak. And she was the curator at one point for Laurel Park, which is this massive zoo in Tenerife in the Canary Islands.
Yeah.
And they focus on citizens. They do other birds, but it's predominantly citizens. So they do a lot of like reintroduction programs. It's a really, really cool facility. So she came over and spoke, and one of the more pressing things she said, you gotta remember, I mean, this is 93 maybe,
Mhm.
Mhm.
was really trying to beat into our heads that if you want to have a positive impact in aviculture, both for the species you're working with, for the success you're going to have, specialization is the key, whether that's a species or a genus. You start, she made a multitude of points, but you start having, a ton of diversity in genera, the likelihood of you having problems with disease go up. You start having a ton of diversity in genera, you're going to likely have some uniformity in nutrition and diet, great for some and not so great for others, squandering that breeding stock potentially. Uh, you specialize, you start figuring out the nuances of successful care and the type of nest you're using or how you're mounting your perches or all of the little things that if you have
Mhm.
you know macaws and cockatoos and conures and amazons, you're just not going to notice.
Right.
And it kind of stuck with me. I I'm a little ADD. I grew up in this. I'm also like very picky. Um, so I'll tend to buy a species and go, all right, these look interesting, and then very quickly like, oh, I can't keep dart frogs. I absolutely hate raising Drosophila, right?
Wow.
Uh, and I just learned the hard way on a lot of stuff, right? I bred ball pythons for a number of years, and while I found it fun and very profitable, um, I hate having live rats around.
Oh man.
I
Mhm.
absolutely despise feeding live rats, and a lot of ball pythons want live rats. And you just start crossing species off and going, well, they're cool, but not for me. Um,
Mhm.
and as I've gotten a little bit older, that thought keeps coming back to me. And I wish I had heeded it when I was younger and just picked a lane and worked with the genus, much in the way that you're doing with the Uromastics,
Hmm.
and focused on one thing. Instead, what I've done is I've gotten older, is I've gone, okay, well, I'll work with this group of snakes, and
Mhm.
then these other couple just for me for fun, like red-tailed green rats, just because I like them.
Mhm.
And then this group of birds and this group of tortoises. But I
Yeah.
don't have a ton of anything. I have like just enough stuff between the plants, the birds, and the tortoises and the snakes to where I'm busy all day. I'm constantly working, but I'm not just sitting there, with 1,000 tubs to clean.
Yeah.
Uh, my day gets broken up into a variety of different chores.
It seems to resemble a little bit of like, I believe I don't remember if it was at Herpeton or if it was at a different conference, but Philippe, it was a talk where he was referring to uh like reptilian monocultures or like herpetocultural monocultures,
Mhm.
right? Like resembling monocrop agriculture. And some of the
I
problems?
think he was making a different point. I think he was actually suggesting herpetoculture's tendency towards monocultures as like trend-based activity, if I recall correctly.
I think you're probably right.
And I think it was more of a detrimental point, which he has a very good point about.
Yeah.
You know, you don't need to look much further than what happened with ball pythons and how, again, I have no problem with the ball python community.
Yeah, sure.
I think that in a lot of ways, it's been a really positive thing.
Yeah.
I know they get a lot of shit from people who think they're better than them, but
Yeah.
whatever. Because ball pythons were so easy in a lot of ways, and people could be successful with them, a lot of people just quit working with other stuff. And there weren't enough people to pick up their reins, and certain species just became less common or altogether disappeared as people focused or hyper focused on ball python. Now, the same argument can be made with geckos, right? Most people start with geckos and they go, oh, you know, I saw some Phelsuma grandis and I thought they were cool or whatever it was. And then they kind of expand and have fun. They build a diverse collection. I did this. And then they go, oh, it doesn't make sense to have all this stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to use it down and I'm just going to work with rhacodactylids or 3 genera they're broken down into now. Or I'm going to, you know, only do Nephris or whatever. And those monocultures do, in a lot of ways, with their success, exclude other species.
Yeah.
But I would argue that there is logic behind the exclusion, right? The people aren't mindlessly choosing, I'm going to work with ball pythons instead of Papuans because money. You need positivity in your life and success for motivation, period. And Papuans are difficult, and you know they're almost exclusively wild caught, and they come in, you know, unhealthy a lot of the time. Building a collection of them and then going on to have success is not an easy task. And is there a permanent place for them? I don't know. So I think it's complicated as far as that whole concept of monoculturing is concerned. I think it's a net positive in a lot of ways, because as it reduces down, let's say there's 3 commercially viable pythons and 3 commercially viable boas, and you know, I'm just, not that there is, but if you use that as a baseline, 3 commercially viable Euromastics and so on and so forth. At a certain point, there isn't really this massive economic incentive to import the other stuff commercially for the pet trade, because the pet trade's demand is already being supplied, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And again, with the wild caught stuff, it's messy, right?
Yeah.
Like Petco and PetSmart have to follow the 4-inch rule, right? For tortoises and turtles. It's not currently economically viable to captive breed a tortoise, particularly something like Testudo that makes a half decent pet for the general public, raise it to 4 inches, and then sell it at an affordable price.
Yeah.
So what fills that gap? Wild caught Russians, you know, and Uzbekistan, they're captive bred, you know, which that's a whole other deeper topic with the farming practices with herpetoculture. But Uzbek is the primary exporter for Russian tortoises. Over 100,000 Russian tortoises get exported annually. And that's been going on for decades. I mean, I think the lowest figures I saw going back around 20 years was like 40,000 annually.
Wow.
That's remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, you look at stuff like water monitors. I think the export quota is like 400,000 annually. For ticks, bloods, tegus, I mean, numbers are in the hundreds of thousands. A lot of that's for the skin trade. And that's where things get messy, right? I mean, when you have a developing country without a ton of jobs and without really a pathway for people, the primary economic drivers tend to be natural resources. So if we go, okay, this is unethical, we're going to stop importing, you know, captive hash, wild-caught baby water monitors, odds are that those trappers, the quotas will stay the same, but those trappers will just shift their attention towards finding larger animals for the skin trade. right?
Mhm.
And the quotas aren't inherently filled, right? It takes activity to fill the quota, right?
Right.
So if they redirect their attention towards filling the skin trade quota, is that a more negative impact than what's occurring? Probably. So it's all super messy stuff, and it's not as simple as, whether or not a retail store that you and I may or may not like selling wild caught baby water monitors to the public for $80.
Mhm.
Of course, that's grotesque, but it's not as simple as their individual activity.
Right.
Right, of course.
Yeah.
As Philippe was saying um in our last conversation, it's like we can't separate ourselves from what's going on in the world
Sure,
as much
absolutely.
as we would like to.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all, I mean, these are very complex issues to unpack.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I think that the more success, like true commercial success, again, there's a multitude of aspects to herpetoculture, and they aren't as simple as commercial activity. But if we care about long-term implications of herpetoculture, fixing the problems that occur on our side, which is on the consumer side, and I would put all three of us in that consumer side.
Mhm.
The 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 best activities we can direct our attention towards is fixing the things that they're ecologically problematic for the trade. And the
Right.
easiest ones to do are to fill consumer demand with captive bred stock and mitigate the demand from wild caught stock.
Yeah.
And frankly, I mean, the big reptile distributors on the east and west coast that do a lot of wild caught trade, they don't give a shit if it's wild caught or captive bred. They want an affordable product for the consumer to buy at a reasonable price point. That's all they care about. So
Right.
if captive bred Polychris are, $80 and wild caught are $4, they're going to buy the wild caught 10 out of 10 times.
Exactly.
Um, and educating the consumer, I mean, as nice as that would be to do, they've already made their transaction most of the time before they ever care enough to get into the weeds on things and learn about it. It isn't until their second or third reptile that they go, oh, this is really interesting stuff. I should join a Facebook group or buy a book, go to a reptile show. So like the damage is done before they're even really accessible.
There's always another sucker.
I mean, a lot of these businesses are based on the model I said earlier when we were talking before, which is you don't need to sell the same customer twice.
Yeah. Well, and there's no something that I've always been a little bit irritated about is there's no accountability or any kind of like guidelines in place for, people just post, oh, captive bred Uromastic sornata. It's like,
there's a handful of people who chronically different species, right?
Yeah.
And it's really obvious if you've been in the hobby for long enough, you're like, oh yeah, he's doing that thing he does.
Yeah. And I mean, everybody, right? It's like if all it takes is one person in that line to say, oh yeah, no, it's captive bred. Okay, then they label it as such. And there's no tracing, there's no accountability, there's no micro, I mean, I guess in some there's going to be microchipping in some larger lizards and stuff, but you can't, it's challenging. One of the most common things I get through my social media pages is people saying, hey, I bought this lizard, he's about 2 years old, captive bred, blah blah blah. And it's like, who knows how old wild caught J-Rye or every fucking time. And
I used you as a reference with a friend like a month ago. A friend messaged me and he's like, hey, I'm thinking about buying this pair of captive bred ornates. And I was like, those are wild caught. And he was like, how do you know? And I was like, I can tell. I was like, hold on a second. So I messaged you and I was like, yo, these are wild caught, right? And you were like 100%. So I screenshotted it, sent it to my friend, and I was like, I told you. But you just know. I mean, you're aware of like what's occurring in the trade. You're aware of who the seller is, where they tend to source their animals. There are people who just habitually lie about the origins of their animals. And then there's people who lie to cover the legality of their animals, right?
Of course,
Well, a lot of the Mexican trade went off the rails for a few years there. And, no one with half a brain is going to post up wild caught a Borneo.
Yeah.
I saw it occasionally, and it was shockingly stupid, but
Bad call.
you would routinely see very clearly wild-caught brownie as cattle bread, right?
Oh yeah.
And they're just doing it because they have to, otherwise they're admitting to illicit trade, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. So, and I'm sorry, I keep saying I'm gonna
It's okay. Go for it.
All right. So
I'll get in there.
What if okay, so I was speaking with a friend a couple days ago, and one of the pieces of criticism that he had for me was that there is so much inter-industry kind of, for lack of a better term, bashing, right, that can go on within herpetoculture. You know, you've got this side over here that says, well, if you're rat keeping at all, you're a fucking asshole. And then over here that says, well, you know, like the more, you know, it's totally fine to just keep a snake in a rack, and you know, all that naturalistic shit is just for it's elitist, and it's you know, not everybody.
It's for the keeper, not for the snake.
Yeah, it's for the keeper, not for the snake, and it's like it's got nothing to do with the actual well-being. You know, and then you've got this group of folks over, you know, on this other corner that says, well, you know, we have to do better, and then this other side that says, well, don't tread on me, and there's all this like kind of disunity.
Sure.
Right? And
we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
Individualistic.
Yeah.
So to respond to that, I would suggest, that's a complex set of issues, right?
Yeah.
Probably the most fundamental aspect of it is that largely because of social media, although I would argue we've always kind of had this aspect to ourselves as people.
Yeah.
We've reached this weird point where people are purveyors of knowledge, not acquirers of knowledge.
Right.
And because of that, everyone has the right answer.
Mm-hmm.
And whether they just thought about it for the first time or whether they've studied it extensively, they tend to think that what they think is the right answer. We're all guilty of it to a lesser or greater extent, but it seems to be a widespread cultural phenomenon happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, some species probably aren't best suited for naturalistic enclosure, right? For some, it's absolutely necessary. And for some, maybe there's a plus and a minus. I would argue it goes, what you keep and how you keep it goes back to what I was saying earlier, which is you got to figure out what kind of keeper you are.
Yeah.
You know, what kind of person you are when it comes to keeping. I absolutely hate messiness and disorder, and there is nothing more depressing to me than walking into a chaotic reptile room and looking around and at someone's setup and going like, you don't even have a fucking system for your water bowls. You don't have like a standardized cleaning method. Like, I don't know how that works for somebody, but that's because it doesn't work for me. And the idea of keeping, glass climbing geckos in naturalistic glass enclosures, particularly something Leachianus, where they're just shitting all over the faces of everything constantly, like, that seems disgusting and abhorrent to me. But it works for some people, right? Yeah. So just because I don't like it doesn't give it any value. I just don't like it. It's like comedy. It's subjective to a certain extent. Yeah. Are your animals healthy? Maybe the fact that your room's a little chaotic is fine because your animals are healthy. I just don't like it. That doesn't mean I need to go, berate someone and say, you should have an organized reptile room.
Yeah.
And I think people tend to lean more into that.
Cable management is atrocious.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I actually got shit for that a number of years ago. I had just set up a bunch of whole gecko wall in the gecko room I used to have, and my cords were a little disorganized in the back, and someone left a snotty comment about how I'd organized the cords. Whatever. Who gives a shit?
How could you, Jordan?
Yeah. I mean, he was right. They were disorganized, and I fixed it as soon as he said it. But I was so focused on all the other aspects that when I was done, I was like, yeah, I'm done. Photo. And then he said it, and I was like, yeah, that does look like shit. I should fix that. Nevertheless,
we all have room to grow.
We don't all have the right answer. I certainly don't. And I don't know. I think anyone out there go like finger wagging beyond like, you know, things that aren't arbitrary.
Yeah.
Like
legitimate harm and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, totally.
Who gives a shit what they think?
Yeah.
I mean, the second they move on from being like, you should only keep things in naturalistic by variance, they're probably on some political thread, finger wagging at someone else or who knows what. Like, that's not the kind of person anybody should pay any fucking attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. I often feel this way about just sharing anything, like writing articles, you know, like all my articles have like a robust disclaimer first thing that's just like, this is just the way I'm doing it.
Sure. Yeah.
It's not the only way to do it. I'm not saying it is.
Yeah, I mean, because great example, right? With your spilotes, would you rather see a guy with 4 pairs of sulfurious struggling with success in beautiful enclosures like yours, which is more or less your experience, right? Because you're still working them out.
Yeah, totally.
Or would you rather walk into a room with 30 adult pairs in freedom breeder boa racks, and you walk in and you're like, oh, not how I'd fucking keep those.
Yeah.
And they're knocking out 18 clutches a season and filling the demand that otherwise goes to wild caught. I think I'd rather see the second one.
Same. You know? Yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, same. Yeah.
So, anything beyond, I don't know, having some respect for other people's approach, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
I think that's a good, just like fundamental baseline to try and hold in perspective, is just that like we're a bunch of geeks,
totally
keeping lizards and snakes in boxes and doing it for our enjoyment ultimately at the end of the day most of the time.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a silly thing to get like really up on your high horse about it.
Totally. I mean, with that said, there's plenty of rooms I've walked into where I'm like, oh, I'm never buying an animal from you.
Sure.
But that's between me and my decisions. I don't need to go tell people, you know.
Yeah. You don't
right. I mean, yeah.
Be like,
yeah,
fuck this guy.
This person's a monster.
Yeah.
Not for me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's not to say that like we're not beyond critique or that we shouldn't be offering critique, right? It's just to like try and hold that in perspective, and like it's so quick. People are just so quick to go from 0 to 100 in this day and age. Maybe like, again, that's just a broader cultural phenomenon as well. But I think that
it's almost like it's like a whole generation of people raised by Puritans, and people act like this is some like recent phenomenon with people like turning everything into some grand moral argument. It's like, do you not remember the 80s and 90s? It's like every musician or actor was boycotted for this or that, and it's the same shit. You know,
well, so I feel like this conversation has been extremely interesting, really illuminating for me, because I think one of the cool things about almost every single show we've done is that every person that comes on has a unique, you know, speaking of unique perspectives and varying perspectives, everybody's had unique perspectives that have given me like a lot of food for thought, and a lot of and there's a lot of stuff where it's like, oh shit, I need to read a little bit more about this, or think a little bit more about this. I want to say, Roy, do you want to, do you have some any other questions that you have that you want to get out before we go to
there's a couple more. I mean, I want to be conscious of your time, Jordan. Do you have room for a couple more?
Yep.
Okay. Well, one, I mean, you spoke earlier to mentorship as being an important thing in the hobby, and you also acknowledged some of your mentors in aviculture. But I'm curious if you've also had mentors in herpetoculture that stand out to you, or anyone who's really influenced your.
Yeah, I would say like Jack Dyer, Todd Dyer's father, was hugely impactful. I mean, I spent every free afternoon I could in his reptile room, bugging the shit out of him, asking every question I could. And he was like the grumpiest, like cool dude you could imagine, and just irritatingly responded to every stupid question I asked in like a way that like he cared, right?
Mm-hmm.
But he was also like that
A
wasn't
curmudgeon.
that wasn't his normal role or personality, right? Like he was trying. I really liked that. He was a super cool dude. I mean, he's still around. He's still a super cool dude.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time, very, very meaningful, impactful. Um, Not many others, to be quite frank. A lot of bad role models. A lot of people who, when I was young and impressionable, impressed upon me some really abhorrent values and perspectives that took a while to outgrow. But yeah, unfortunately, I mean, that's part of the reason I've advocated for it is
Mm-hmm.
in herpetoculture, it seems to be a scarcity.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's something that we need a lot more of.
Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, mentors.
Yeah.
I mean, very few like face-to-face mentors. You know, I think that like the first one I would have to acknowledge is my dad, because he, you know, was kind of the seed of my interest in reptiles. He had
Oh, cool.
a whole reptile room.
Oh, I didn't know that. What was his
When I was
focus?
a little kid. He didn't really have like a focus. He was just kind of all over the place. He also had
Oh,
arachnids, but at one point when I was a little kid, we had like 60 animals in the house, you know,
oh,
30 tarantulas, and he had a yellow anaconda, he had a eastern indigo, he had a green tree monitor at one point. So and my dad's he's a goldsmith, he's a super meticulous craft oriented person, and I think that I learned a lot from him just through osmosis. It wasn't
okay.
really super hands-on, but
And that era, just for context, I mean, that era, advanced herpetoculture was just keeping a cool collection. I mean,
yeah,
there were breeders, certainly, largely colubrid breeders and a handful of boa breeders, some pythons. But advanced herpetoculture was basically anything beyond just taking something from pets and putting it in a glass aquarium, right? So
totally.
the context of the time matters. I feel like in having a collection like that.
Yeah. There's a couple other people that I want to shout out just from my kind of my teenage years when I started to get like more seriously into herpetoculture, and I was working with, you know, a bunch of big colubrids, Trimarchon and Spilotes, and when I got that clutch of sulphureus, I had an imported female that I brought in and turned out to be gravid. And there was like a kind of a community of people that was coalesced around the kingsnake.com indigo forum at that time.
Back
That
in
was
the
like the
Fred
big,
Albury days.
yeah, back, yeah, it's like the big colubrid nerds hung out in there. And there were a few guys, one guy, Bill Reed, who I have no idea what he's doing now, but his handle on that site was Site Hunter. And he kept coach whips and Spilotes and sulphureus, and he was doing some interesting things, keeping them like with these indoor outdoor pass throughs so they could get outside. And but he was really generous with me with his time in email correspondence, like, okay, this is what you got to do, like this is the right amount of water you want in your coconut fiber substrate if you're going to incubate them on that. You know, you want to squeeze it to this extent, you know. And
Yeah.
so I'd
There
give
was
him a
a
shout
guy
out.
back in that era, to derail it a bit,
No, it's good.
focused on Texas indigos in like I want to say the Chicago area. Virgil Willis, I want to say. Do you recall him?
Yeah, I remember him. Yeah.
Yeah, and Brad Shalaba. He did a lot of dry marcon back then. Yeah, there was a bunch of like diehard guys back then that were really cool.
Yeah, totally. And so a lot of those guys were really, really generous and forthcoming with this little scrappy 16-year-old in the trailer park in Northern California. So definitely owe something to those guys.
Yeah, I mean, much like you, I spent a lot of my like later teenage years on King Snake.
Yeah.
Just being a fucking menace. You know, just like a teenager, right? Going that, just making John Hollister want to murder me, and yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, those are good times. Those are good times.
From my perspective, it's all interrelated. But so I guess if Roy, if you're cool with this, I want to.
Yeah, of course.
I have one final kind of question for you here, Jordan, and normally we tend to leave this question pretty open-ended, and I'd like to maybe just put a slight slant on it just because of the nature of the conversation that we've had so far. So normally the question is, why herpetoculture? And that's just intended to be sort of like a broad or specific kind of, unique to you, tell me why that you think this is important. But I'd like to maybe see if you can slant it towards, but because I'm an optimistic asshole, slant it towards like the positive end of things. Can you give me like?
I like how that's a necessary additive.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I respond to this, but try not to be a negative asshole.
No, it's not. No, I mean, it's not because I think you're especially negative. It's because I think you think about this stuff in a very interesting way. And I think I'd be very curious to know your kind of best case argument for the existence of what we do. Like, what's the?
Well, I mean, to start it off negatively, as you anticipated. So on one hand, right, you have the AZA, and different iterations of it globally, but largely you have institutions that are working to, on one hand, educate the public about maybe why we should have dolphin-free tuna, on one extreme, to why maybe preserving land is necessary and why these animals are interesting, cool, and worth saving, right? And then the other part of what they do is, stuff like SSPs, right, where they actually work to expand diverse breeding populations of a given species, ideally with reintroduction programs, and then have a kind of like a preservation collection captivity for that given species, right? That's rad. They can't do everything. So herpetoculture at its best does something similar for the species that the AZA and other institutions can't do. There's too much diversity on this planet for institutions to carry all of the weight. So at our best, we do that. And we should aspire towards that. There's a multitude of things we do that institutions can't do. I mean, there's a crowdsourcing is a thing for a reason, right? As soon as there's a bureaucracy involved, someone maybe has an interesting idea, but they can't implement it, right? And I can try all kinds of things and, in the comfort of my own home and see what works, see if that's an improvement or not when it comes to methods. And herpetoculture has done a ton on that front about reinventing methods and improving methods for captive care and also propagation. Huge there. I think that things like what I had tried to start a decade ago but didn't wind up working out is something we're now finally starting to see happen, which is mail-in diagnostics, whether that's PCRs or cultures or whether that's DNA testing. Seeing that occur is also really interesting because that's going to expand knowledge in a way that institutions they don't have the data pool to pull from that we have. There's a lot of room for us to have healthy actions within the community, and we do a number of positive and interesting things within the community. I just think we could be better. I know I can.
Yeah. I mean, I think room for improvement is always a good thing. I like that. That's a great, again, just speaking to the things that I feel like every single damn show, I take something different away from all of this. And
I, on the other hand, learned nothing. Totally fucking right.
No, I mean,
brutal, man.
Yeah, that was harsh.
I just got to lighten the mood a little bit.
No, I'm just screwing around. I mean, I wish I would laugh harder, but if I laugh, I'm going to cough up a storm.
You got to quit smoking.
This godforsaken cough. It just will not go away. Well, I think that's
he's just going to pretend like he just didn't even hear what you said there, Jordan.
I know, right?
You see that? You notice that he just floated right over.
Yeah.
What did I miss?
He's like, let's not talk about that.
Oh God. God damn it!
He told you to quit smoking.
This guy. Oh, that's no way, dude. Damn it.
Oh, there he goes. Now he has to mute. Look what we've done to him.
You got me, dude. That just
Yeah.
got me. And this fucking mouse just came back and tried to. He thought there was gonna be more. I don't have.
You gotta end that thing's bloodline, man.
I know. So I got one of them about 2 weeks ago, and I didn't know if there were going to be any more, because and then earlier today I was kind of cleaning up and fucking around, and I saw a few little turds in a few places while I was sweeping, and I was like, motherfuckers. And it's
You gotta start keeping your food in rodent-proof bins, man.
I do. I have it. All the food's isolated, but what happens is every once in a while I will like drop like a like the Missouri tortoise food. Every once in a while I'll drop a piece or two.
You just leave a little food out for them.
Yeah. It's because while I'm
Just a little treat,
and it just gets away from me.
Sure.
And
As a benevolent
I'll
guy.
see it in a corner over here, or whatever, and I have to go figure it out. But you'd think the mice would, in my facility, it's not super fancy. I mean, there's gaps in the walls and places. I mean, there's just places where they're going to get in, and so I expect them to be semi-regular occurrence here, and I do a pretty good job of keeping it mitigated. And I don't, to a certain extent, I kind of don't care that they're here. It's when they start getting into the cages or start eating some of the food. If I accidentally leave a box of Timothy hay out and they chew that apart and get inside, I'm like, son of a bitch.
You get a terrier in there, man.
Yeah, right. Something.
There you go.
Excuse me. Well, I'm gonna cough. Sorry.
Let's just watch this.
Yeah, let's just watch Phil cough here. Poor guy. Oh no, we're done to him. It's brutal.
Yeah.
Just picking on him.
So,
Going.
Are you planning to expand your species at all, or what are your aspirations?
Me? Or
Roy?
Yeah,
I don't give a shit what you're doing.
Hey.
Not really. No, so right now I just moved. My partner and I.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing that.
And we bought like a pretty a rough little cabin on some land.
Congrats, man.
And I'm going to be building some. Thanks for that. Yeah, we feel really blessed. But I'm going to be building some little like 10 by 12 studios for my herps. Basically, I'll have like a temperate shed,
like species specific rooms kind of idea.
Basically, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, kind of more regional specific rooms, but I'm just going to keep working at a small kind of scale, and I think I've pretty much got the species I'm going to be working with right now. The most recent acquisition was a pair of Polychrus peruvianus that I got that were captive bred and born in the UK, and that was like a dream species for me. So I'm excited to be working with those.
Nice, man.
And that's kind of it for now. I mean, I'm sure that'll change.
You're doing the thing that I feel like more people should do. When collection management is a developed skill, right? We don't have it inherently. You learn with time, but so many people are like Uromastics and chameleons and frogs and this temperate species and this tropical species all in a room. And it just seems to be the most recurrent recipe for failure or really mitigated success in a lot of collections I see.
I totally agree.
If there's some advice from an old head that's done a lot of things wrong, don't try to mix a whole bunch of different ecosystems into one room. It doesn't work well.
I've
totally
fucked it up majorly.
Yeah, we've all done it. We'll learn, by doing things wrong.
Yeah.
I had my, my bearded dragon and my California king snake and my yellowtail Cree all in the same room, when I was a teenager. And now I look at that and I'm like, God, like, I just couldn't do that these days. No way. I wouldn't want to, but.
Well, so what do you think, what does the future hold for you, Jordan? What do you think what are some of your goals? And
I've just been building my colubrid collection. When I got back into reptiles, it was like, I want one room for snakes. So I just went out and I bought all the freedom breeders and I fill the room with the racks, and I was like, I'll slowly fill the racks. I didn't want to do the thing that I've done when I was younger, and a lot of people do, where it's like, these are cool, then figure out where it's going, right?
Yeah.
So I designed the room, and then that was my my restrictions I put on myself. So I've just been expanding my Leonis collection. That seems like a species that there's so much interesting diversity, and yeah, there's some problems, right? Like a lot of like mutt stuff out there to avoid, but it's easy enough if you pay attention and have a decent understanding to avoid.
Yeah.
But there's so much interesting diversity that it just made sense to build a collection of like all of the most extreme examples. So I've been doing that, and a handful of different bowls and pines, and I'd like to kind of carry on that direction. I do have some rat snakes, the red-tailed green rats. I bought some captive bred babies that were produced last year by Patrick Sterling.
Nice.
And then I've got a pair of Ridley Eye, and then that's it. The Ridley Eye and the red-tailed green rats are basically my only non-temperate snakes. I don't really plan to expand outside of that. And then the tortoises, which I would like to continue expanding. A focus predominantly on like temperate tortoises. And then I really would just, the birds, I plan to just keep acquiring as many African hornbill species as I can, that are not loud, which is like 5 species, right? Like, so that's like an ongoing thing with the hornbills. It's a lot of space and a lot of money and all that thing, so it's slow, but as long as they don't go sideways, there's some room there, and that's kind of it. I don't plan to build some reptile empire. I do a ton of plants. I'd like to expand that. This year I took it light because we moved last year, but historically I was growing 2,000 or 3,000 trees a year. And then this year and last year, I grew maybe around 12,000 cactus per year. So it's kind of cactus made more sense with the move, a little bit less room. So just kind of keep going that direction until I'm just like, oh my God, what have I done?
Help.
Yeah,
for sure. Okay.
So you have to hit the eject button.
Yeah.
Where can people find your plants? Like, where can they find you on?
So everything's just kind of
Instagram, all that stuff. I know you had an Etsy.
Yeah, it's all centralized on my website. So CaliforniaBreedersUnion.com, like care sheets on tortoise babies, and link to my Instagram, link to my Etsy store, all that kind of stuff.
Cool.
But I'm kind of like with Instagram, I'll just while I'm working, pull out my phone and be like, oh, this is what's in front of me right now, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll make sure to add all of your various endeavors linked in like show notes and everything when we throw this stuff up on the interwebs when it goes up. It'll be in about I think we're like operating at about a month out, right? So each interview we do is approximately a month from release, basically. And
5 weeks.
And again, man, really appreciate because I know one of the themes I think with a lot of the people that we speak to is they tend to be pretty busy. Like they have a lot of different things that they're working on at any given point in time. And so we really do appreciate you carving out time to talk with us and do something that maybe isn't always easy for everybody to do, which is talk in a way that's going to be public and everything. I know it can be hard for some, and so
I hate this.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we really. I mean, thanks for letting us twist your arm into coming on. I think that it's a valuable conversation. You have a lot of valuable insight and perspective, so I appreciate you sharing it.
Thanks for the flattering comment. Anybody listening that plans to ask me to do this was just for them. I'm not for anyone else. I've already told you no.
Suck it, everybody else.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding. We'll definitely edit that out for sure.
Okay, no, I'll leave that.
No way. I'm not going to tell everybody. I'm not going to leave to me telling everybody else to suck it on the show.
I mean,
maybe I will. I don't know. It's obviously a joke, but it's fine. Here, let me just stop the recording really quick.